Hi, everybody, and welcome back to video number 3 in Chapter 9. And when we left off, we were looking at the materials variances overall summaries. Just to refresh your mind, there we go. And now, what we're going to take a look at is the standard quantity compilation of that. And as you see here, how did we get these numbers? As I mentioned verbally, we take 0.1 kilograms per parka times the 2,000 actual parkas to get 200 kilograms at standard. So the 2,000 parkas is an actual, but the 0.1 kilogram per parka is the standard. So that's where that 200 came from. Okay, that's the standard quantity computation. Now, same thing with the $4.90 that I verbally analyzed there. And here, we're just taking the $1,029 and dividing that, we know this total actual price, and then we're going to divide that through by the number of actual items that we made to get to the actual quantity or price per kilogram here. Okay, so if you want to do it via equation, you're welcome to. I think you're going to get lost. I always did when I was first learning this, and I think it's much easier to visualize this calculation than this. But it's the same thing. It comes up with the same numbers. And you can get your material price variance by taking the actual times the actual minus the actual quantity times the standard price. Just like I mentioned here. Here's the actual, and here's the actual quantity and actual price. And that comes up with your price variance. And away you go at $21 favorable. Same thing with the materials quantity variance. And here we take the actual quantity times the standard price. That's what's in the middle here. And we subtract out the standard times the standard to get to the variance of $50 unfavorable. Okay, same calculations, just using equation format instead of a more graphical format. All right, who is responsible for what? Here, in the real world, it's a little more blurred, but here our production manager is responsible for the materials quantity variance, where the purchasing manager is responsible for the materials price variance. And then, now, having said that, sometimes the production manager will have a poor quantity variance because the materials that were purchased for him or her didn't have the level of anticipated quality in those products. But that's another story. For this slide, we want to say that material quantity variance is the production manager, materials price variance is the purchasing manager. And the standard price is used to compute the quantity variance so that the production manager is not held responsible for purchasing manager's performance. Now, as I mentioned here, he might say, or she might say, I'm not responsible for this unfavorable materials quantity variance. You purchased cheap material, so my people had to use more of it. And then the purchasing manager may say, your poor scheduling sometimes requires me to rush my materials order at a higher price, maybe higher shipping as well, causing unfavorable price variances. All those things need to be analyzed carefully. Okay, so if Hansen Incorporated had the following direct materials necessary to manufacture one Zippy, And we have 1.5 pounds per zippy at $4 per pound standard, right? And then last week, we used 1,700 pounds of materials that were purchased to make 1,000 zippies. The materials cost a total of $6,630. Okay, so how many pounds of materials should Hansen have used to make 1,000 zippies? So if I go back, you can see it's 1.5 pounds per zippy. So the answer is going to be 1,500 pounds. 1,000 times 1.5 pounds per unit gives me 1,500 pounds in total. The materials quantity variance for the week is going to be what then? It's going to be 800. That's because we had 200 pounds of that we used more than what we were allotted in the standard times the $4 per pound, giving me $800 unfavorable. A nice French spelling to unfavorable there. Anyway, I think you all can see that materials quantity variance calculation. Now, if we do it a little more graphically, which I think is easier to understand, here we have actual and actual quantity and actual price. We back into the actual price by dividing the 6,630 by 1,700 pounds. And that gives me $3.90 per pound. Now the actual quantity, 1,700 pounds, same as here, times the $4 standard price gives me $6,800 in the middle. And then our standard quantity, standard price. Here's the 1,500 pounds that we were allotted times $4 per pound. And we got that simply by multiplying the 1.5 pounds per zippy times 1,000 units to get the 1,500 pounds. And that gives us our standard quantity variance of $800 here, unfavorable. Okay. And so a good thing to get in the practice of doing is to check that the difference between here and here is the same as the sum of from here to here and from here to here. So that's one piece of it. So the materials price variance then for the week is going to be 170 favorable. How did we get that? Go back over here, 170 from here to here. And that's favorable because my actual is a little bit better than my actual times standard price. So if I subtract that 170, then that's favorable from the 800 unfavorable. In total, my spending variance is going to be that difference. Okay, so the standard quantity for 1,000 zippies again was this 1.5 pounds. That's the standard. This 1,000 units was the actual units that were made. And so we were given 1,500 pounds, which we should have used to make those zippies. All right, so now we're going to compute the direct labor and efficiency rates. So we have the labor rate, called the rate or wage variance sometimes, and efficiency variance, and explain their significance. Now, here, when we made those parkas, we allowed 1.2 standard hours per parka at $10 per hour. And last month, our employees actually worked 2,500 hours at a labor cost in total of $26,250 to make 2,000 parkas. So if I make 2,000 parkas, and it took my actual hours were 2,500, and my total labor cost was 26,250. That backs into $10.50 per hour. Okay, and then at standard, I'm allowed 1.2 standard hours per parka. If I multiply 1.2 times 2,000 parkas, I get 2,400 hours at standard. Okay, and then my standard wage rate is $10 per hour. So now I can calculate my rate variance, sometimes called price variance for material, and our efficiency variance. And both are unfavorable. So in total, my spending variance is $2,250. Okay. Now, if I take a look at the spending variance, or I should say how we calculate these numbers, just as I verbally said, we take the 1.2 hours per parka times 2,000 parkas. That gives me 2,400 hours here. That's where we get that number. Now we also need to calculate the $10.50. And as you see, just as I verbally said, we take the 26,250 divided by the 2,500 hours to back into the $10.50 per hour actual. Okay. So we can break those down again into equations, same kind of thing that the graphic shows here. I won't go through that in any depth. I think you can follow the arithmetic here very much exactly the same as we discussed in the prior slides. Coming up, of course, with the same numbers from the prior slide. Okay, now labor variances. The production manager is usually held accountable for labor variances because they can influence, one, what mix of skills do you need to accomplish the work tasks? And of course, the level of employee motivation. Better motivated employees work better and more efficiently. The quality of the production supervision can definitely affect all of this, and naturally training our employees adequately to make our products definitely can affect that. So you can sort of see that a better trained employee, a more tenured employee, probably is going to make a little bit more money. So sometimes you can see that reflected in the wage rate and efficiency variances. So the maintenance manager may say, I'm not responsible for the unfavorable labor efficiency variances. You purchased cheap material, and so it took me more time to process it. And the purchasing manager again might say, I think it took more time to process the materials because the maintenance department has poorly maintained your equipment. Okay. So again, you would have to analyze that in more depth to find out what was really going on. So here, Hansen has the following direct labor standard to manufacture one zippy, and it's 1.5 standard hours to make one zippy at $12 per direct labor hour. And last week, we used 1,550 direct labor hours that we worked at a total labor cost of $18,910 to make 1,000 zippies. You're starting to see how we're going to put this together from the prior slides. And we'll continue on with this wage rate variance here. And that's going to be 310 unfavorable. And that looks like a good place for us to stop this video. And when we continue, we will look at wage rate variances and efficiency variances more depth. Until that time, bye for now.